It's prioritizing your needs, the needs that need to be met in order for you to be your best self. And if you're a parent, it's to be your best self so that you can give your kids your best self, help them be their best selves. Welcome back to another episode of the Parenting Potential Podcast. My name is Charles.
And I am Monet.
And we are back at it again. So like we said in the last episode, we took a hiatus, but we're back and we're going to try to bring y'all some really, really good content. So if you haven't seen the previous episodes, one thing we're trying to do is have impromptu topics, right? I guess that's how you would phrase it, where the other person comes up. Okay.
Yeah, one person comes up with it and the other does not know what the topic is. And we're doing that in the hopes that we can just have the most authentic conversation possible, where we don't try to plan what we're going to say beforehand, but just let the convo flow as it goes. And so I had been tasked this episode to come up with a topic. And honestly, I really didn't want to plan it much myself. And so I'm just going to kind of throw it out there, what I've been thinking, what I think it's important for us to discuss today, and we can kind of work through the topic together.
Okay. And if y'all hear any noise, it's Leilani. She's feeding right now. So yes. If y'all know, she loves to make an appearance into these particular episodes, but we'll try our best to talk a little louder.
Yes, and I'll try to keep her a little quiet. So yeah, I'm excited for today because I feel like this episode has been a long time coming, and I think it's a really important topic specifically for us, but just for all parents in general. But I wanted us to discuss...
Drum roll.
So essentially, the topic of self-care as a parent and the importance of it and the role in becoming our best parents and being better for our kids. And I really wanted to dive into this more than just the surface of like, what can you do for self-care? But I want us to really, first of all, kind of identify what we think self-care looks like now in our life as parents, and like what we really truly think is the importance of it. Because so many people say, like, it's so important to take care of yourself first, or that whole airplane analogy where you put your face mask on before you help, like, your children or whatever. But, like, truly, why is that necessary? And I feel like we have so many examples of showing the times we haven't really prioritized that has probably been to our detriment and our downfall. And so that's really just what I want us to explore today. And we can kind of chunk it up and get into it like piece by piece. But first, I just want to hear your thoughts about that, Charles.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is something, just to reiterate, that we have struggled with, but it's such a arbitrary thing to say. Like, what does that even mean? It might mean something different from each person, but I'll say this. Mm-hmm. There needs to be a balance, right? I mean, it can't be solely just taking care of the kids, of your spouse, and it can't be totally, I'm going to take care of myself the entire time, mm-hmm. and things will work themselves out. So it's finding a balance, and the balance is different depending on your situation and who you are. So yeah, my head's kind of going a million different directions right now with this, but I would say that if I had to define self-care, mm-hmm. for example, let's just start off with, it's prioritizing your needs, the needs that need to be met in order for you to be your best self. And if you're a parent, it's to be your best self so that you can give your kids your best self, help them be their best selves. Very blankety But I mean, that's how I would, define that. Because then again, I'd have time to think about this. But thinking on the fly, that's what I would define it as. And I know that I'm personally not there.
Oh, yeah, no.
At all.
Right, not at all. And for me, I can best define self-care by the illustration of my complete neglect of my own self-care. And I see it in so many ways. But one big thing is, and I've actually spoken to my therapist about this in the past, but I have always been a very notoriously stingy person. Stingy to my core. I really like to preserve my money, save it, not spend it on anything. My mom always jokes that she would send me on field trips as a kid with a certain amount of money, and I'd come back with actually more money than she gave me. That's how serious I am about this. But I really don't like spending money on things. But ever since when Anaya was born, I was fine with money being spent on her needs, always. No matter what. I mean, all the things we have to buy her for the betterment of herself or anything that we think would be beneficial for her, no problem. But then, again, the stinginess toward myself has stayed true. I really have, not tried to buy things for myself or not try to, just do my basic self-care things. Trying to cut corners and, I'll paint my nails myself. Because of course, I'm not going to go and get my nails done or so many examples of that. I think even things like doctor's appointments. I always want to make sure that our girls have their doctor's appointments lined up. Don't know the last time I went to a doctor's appointment for myself, aside from my, prenatal visits when I was pregnant. And I can just think of so many things time and time again, me maybe not prioritizing getting my hair done or all these things, buying myself new clothes. And I say to myself constantly, eventually I'll do that. Or when people suggest, Monet, you should do this for yourself, or you should take time to do this. I always have the excuse of later, at some point I'll be able to, but not now. And I have no problem. And of course, I love to do all the things we need to do for our girls. But I always feel I just can't do it right now for me.
And as you were saying that, I was thinking of years ago when I was very stingy. We were doing that budgeting plan, or even with work. I'm I'm doing work, and just let me finish this, and I will be good to go. And you said something. What did you say? Do you remember what you said?
There will always be
an excuse as to why you have to work. So I feel this is one of those scenarios where I'm just going to use your own words against you. There's always going to be things that you have to do for the girls or for the house or whatever it might be, a career. And if you don't set a foundation or at least a system now, even if it's not spending money, it's more so can you just go out for a walk for 5 minutes? Can you set up an appointment months in advance for to get your hair done or get your nails done? Just do it in advance. The small things that won't take up too much time or money, etc. Just set it up now, because what's going to happen is when you do have more time or have more money or whatever it is, you're going to probably act the same way because that's what you're used to.
Yeah, it's the patterns that we just have to break.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing something on Instagram, and it was behind every adorable, good-looking child, there are 2 parents that essentially just look busted. And it's those things that we joke about and see, and we're oh my God, so true. But it really is just unfortunate, because it shouldn't be that way. And I don't want to teach our girls that either, that we neglect ourselves and we don't prioritize our own self-care, because I don't want the girls to pick up on those things. Like we've mentioned before, your children are literally sponges and they soak up everything. And even the things that are left unsaid, they will see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a good point, what you want your kids to see, because they learn by seeing more so than listening. I've always heard that, but I believe that to be true. And so I think when you think about self-care, what I'm trying to probably figure out myself, but I'm spitballing here, is if you treat your kids so well, you should treat yourself well.
Yeah.
So treat yourself the way you would treat your kids, because we all as parents want the best for our kids, and so our goal is to give them the best. So then give yourself the best, because you're really not giving the best if you're not giving yourself the best to give them the best of yourself. Ooh, I like that.
Yes, put it on a shirt.
Put it on a shirt, right? So yeah, I think it's one of the, you know how I am. I'm very like straightforward with this kind of stuff, where it's like you don't need to have a whole philosophy and plan. It's just do it, right? Just do it. I don't make it a big thing. Go outside, go get some ice cream, right? Like go get your hair done. Go just have a couple hours to yourself. And you know, we know it's harder to do that given our circumstance because of your schedule and the needs of the girls. But at the end of the day, if you care enough about it, you'll make room for it. And I think your grandma says, what did she say?
That basically the premise of if you cared about it or if it's important to you, you'll make time for it.
Right. So you're not important to you. That's basically your actions are showing. I know you don't actually not think yourself as important, but your actions are showing that you're not really. And my actions too, right? I think that there's different levels to this, and I don't know if you want to speak on yours, but you know, I think that there's things that I think we are able to, like, I think I'll say this. I think you find solitude in just watching maybe one of those dating shows on Netflix, and that's a nice break mentally, right?
Yeah.
So one may argue that's some sort of self-care because you're taking a break from all the medical knowledge in your head that you have to understand when you go to work and the hustle and bustle of taking care of two beautiful girls and running a household. So getting a mental break just by watching a Netflix series is, you know, I think it's a step. It's not everything. It's not going to solve everything, but at least it's something that you're doing that makes you happy. Maybe that's self-care. You're doing something that makes you happy because, again, that happiness, you know, really does make a big difference psychologically. It gives you that revival, or it's reviving to kind of get you back out there to continue the good work you're doing for the girls and for the family.
Yeah. And I think truly, like, as parents, you can, whether you feel guilty or feel like you're spread so thin, feel like there's so many other things to get done. So how dare you spend time to step away and go to get your hair done, for example? Because what is that meaning? Like, your children still need to be fed. They still need to have all of these things taken care of. So when you're going off to get your hair done, like, what's happening? Or who are you then putting the burden on? And so number one, it proves even more so the importance of having your tribe, which we talked about. Like, when you have the tribe where you can spread duties over and like they have your back and can help support you, you are able to have those moments of reprieve to get away. But it also, if you prioritize, it's not an all or nothing type of deal. If you say, like, this week, if the only thing I do for myself is go and get my hair done, then I'm going to do it. And sometimes it's just having those little moments to do something refreshing can actually allow you to come back and be an even better parent.
Yep.
Because I know there's times when we have been like spread so thin. Like, I just now came off of my 12-day stretch of work, meaning I worked 12 days straight with no days off. And so this is actually my first day off in 12 days. And when you are working like that, you're just like in this constant just tumble, and you feel like you're not even a human being, let alone, you know, a parent. And so you're just almost dragging your feet. You're surviving and not thriving. You're getting things done, but maybe not to the best. But on the other hand, Charles, when you recently had to go out of town for something, you came back home and you had just that rejuvenation that allowed you to actually, I think, be better at all fronts.
Yeah.
Because you had that time away. And the few times that you have gone out of town, like where you had to fly somewhere else since Anaya's been born, I know every time you came back, I feel like it was so good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, even if it wasn't intended to be like a self-care trip away, you weren't like vacationing out with your friends, but like even just taking a work trip or something, you had that reprieve in a way. You were able to do some things for yourself. You took care of yourself in a different way where you only had to focus on you, and you came back and you were better for it.
Yeah.
And so realizing, again, like it's investing in yourself is not something where you should look at it like this is taking away from, but in a lot of ways, it's actually probably adding more than anything else.
Right. I mean, what it is it's detaching, right? And so that's what any facet, whether you're a parent or not, it's important to detach from the noise and be able to just think, do nothing, be away from distractions. And of course, when I go out of town, I do have to go to work. But when I go back to the hotel, that's my time to say, you know what, let me just sit in this chair, maybe go to sleep, or just think, right? Or make phone calls. And so I think it's really important that really, when you think about self-care as a parent, detaching is probably one of the biggest things that helps you become, I think, in my opinion, right, become refreshed and revived. And so add to that too, I read a book called Redeeming Your Time, and in it, it was talking about having quiet time. And quiet time, it's a biblical-based book, or biblically based book, where, they said Jesus would go away and just be alone and have no distractions, right? And so they mentioned Martin Luther King, who obviously was extremely powerful in what he was able to do in this country and this world, had to detach in order to be his best self. So as parents, it's important for us to kind of follow the same notion that being away or giving yourself an opportunity to just breathe is actually, our breaks, is actually a good thing. You shouldn't feel guilty about that, because it allows for you to think about your next step, or just kind of, hey, I just need a quick second just to catch up with my own emotions, right?
Yeah.
As parents, we all know we have emotions. So, yeah, I would say detachment is important. It's important.
And it's something that also kind of made me think about is, I know a lot of times with women, but I think with anybody, when you know that you look good, you know how you walk around with like a different swagger, a different confidence, you take on the day differently than if you feel like you look a hot mess. And I think in a similar way, when you've invested a lot in yourself, when you feel good emotionally or mentally, I think the same can be true, that you're walking around differently. You are operating differently than as opposed to if you just feel tired and beat down. You feel like your needs outside of those basic needs are being met. Like you feel like a person again, because again, there are times where I feel we are just surviving and we just don't even feel like real people. We don't feel like we are meeting our wants and our needs and our desires. We're just eating, sleeping, barely, and walking around this world. And that really does show in all of the things that we do. We're just getting by, but we're not reaching our full potential in them, because we're barely reaching our full potential as a person, let alone as a parent.
So yeah, when you look good, you feel good.
Yeah. And when you feel good, you do good.
Or you do good, good things happen. I'm just kidding. Sorry. But let's get into it, because it's important to be practical and kind of give some steps that maybe we should be following and that the viewers should be following. So since this is your episode, right? Mm-hmm. Let's go to first. Let's kind of recap self-care, just to define it for people, and then think about what are some of the ways, examples of self-care, and how can someone identify ways to make time and use yourself as an example to get to there.
So for me, I think self-care is investing in and prioritizing you. And however that may look. I think it's important for you to identify what constitutes your self-care. So let's say if for your emotional self-care and well-being, you are more of an introvert, and so you feel like you just always need these moments of just recharge and reprieve where you're by yourself, then I think identifying that is good for your self-care. If you like to get your hair done and your nails done, if you really like to get massages, that might be something that is a part of your self-care. It's knowing yourself and knowing what rejuvenates you, knowing what makes you happy, knowing what brings you peace, knowing the things you need when you're stressed, and like getting all those things. Because I think when you don't invest in your self-care, the things you're doing are the total antithesis of what actually makes you thrive. Like when we are not investing in ourselves, if you think about what we end up doing, like we first take away the things for ourselves. We're not taking away our workload. We're not taking away our house responsibilities or the duties we need for our children. We're taking away like, maybe I don't have time to go and get my nails done. Maybe I can't go and buy this for myself. Maybe I can't spend time and binge watch this show that I really love. And so I think it's thinking about all the things you would choose to do if you felt like you had the time and the means to do it. That is probably the first thing you need to add back to have your self-care. What else did you ask me? Like basically a blueprint, so to speak?
Yeah, I think just giving this quick practical steps, because I think one of the things that we got feedback on, which is great feedback, is giving examples, but also how do we use this practically? What's the practical steps we should be?
Yeah. So for me, I'm going to just think of it in like, for us, because this podcast is, I think, just as much for anybody who wants to listen to it as it should be for us. And so for us, and I'll say even starting with like for me, what I want to do is at least start off by prioritizing one thing a day for my self-care. And so what that can look like. And I think the most helpful thing is to think truthfully on a day where you feel like you can't do anything. What is even a simple thing that will make you feel better? And so, and I think also thinking of things that can be applied under different constraints, like making an idea of something you can do for your self-care that's free, maybe something you can do for your self-care that's inexpensive, something else you can do for your self-care that might be a little bit more pricey, something you can do for your self-care that maybe only takes a few seconds, something that takes only a few minutes, something that might take hours, or something that you can do like a full day off. And then making sure that you always have one of those things you do every day, just based on how that day goes. So because I had a day off today, Charles is off today, some of the things I think today that I was able to do for self-care and that we even did as a family that really did rejuvenate me was go out together and take a nice walk and go by the water as a family and bring snacks and food for the girls and just relax there. Tomorrow I'm working and I'm doing my 28-hour shift. So obviously self-care will look different tomorrow. But if I say, you know what, there is at least a 15-minute chunk of time where I can go off, even when I'm pumping, for example, and maybe I'll just like pull up on my phone one of the like this YouTube video that like I want to watch, or just scroll on my Instagram and like look at some good like fun places in Orlando. I like doing that sometimes. Look at fun places in Orlando and bookmark them as things we can do in the future when we have time off. But just being intentional, I think, before the day starts is what I think would be best to institute self-care. Because when you're in the trenches and things are wild and crazy, and maybe you have chaos going on at home and your children are running around, that is not the time to say, oh, what can I do for my self-care? I'm sure that's the last thing that's on your mind. But if you say, no, I know that I planned yesterday that today I was going to take maybe the 10 minutes before I fed the girls dinner or right after they went down to bed, that was going to be when I did XYZ. Like, plan that out and do it.
I like that. And so, what are you going to do starting tomorrow or starting today? I mean, you mentioned that we went out, but I think is one thing to talk about the example of us doing as a family, but what about yourself? What are you going to do starting, let's say, tomorrow or the next day? Better.
Yeah. So it's the planning, right? So I know, it's been a minute since I've gotten my hair done. And oh, wow, it's been since my birthday that I was able to just get my nails done professionally as opposed to me painting them. And I like to get my nails done. And so I think the first thing I'm going to do is identify these things that, like, if I don't think about them ahead of time, they won't happen. And literally schedule them now and make them happen. Because again, scheduling them when I'm super busy, I know, first of all, I'm not going to do it. And I know I'm not even going to think to do it. I'm going to be so busy with other things. So now that I have this time in this moment now is identifying those things and actually putting them, like they're another thing I have to work around. Making them a priority. Yes. Yeah. Putting them on the calendar. Because again, those are the priorities that like go to the wayside when you're busy with other things. It's not the care of your child. That won't go by the wayside. Yeah. I know I'll never say, I don't have time to feed the girls, or we don't have time.
But they'll go by the wayside if you go by the wayside, right? Because I mean, if you're not taking care of yourself, eventually you'll come to a point where you won't be able to take care of your kids. And I know that's dramatic, but it's honestly the truth. And I know for me, I haven't encouraged either one of us to make ourselves the priority at some point, right? So again, it's you're gonna bleed yourself dry.
Yeah. And you think you can just handle all of this stuff, and you think that the time you can, and that the time you can do all of those things is when things are at least more settled. Because our life is never going to be us probably sipping pina coladas on the beach. Like, we're always going to have something that's going to keep us busy.
Well, we'll sip sometimes. We'll sip on.
Yeah, they will be moments for sure. And that's an important key too. There should always be moments of like pure self-care for sure. But for the most part, if we're sitting here waiting for that time in our life where there's no responsibilities and nothing going on, that'll be the time I finally am going to prioritize those things. I mean, we'll be waiting our whole lives for that. And so just knowing that the reality is that more so than there being an infinite amount of opportunities for us to do those things, it's making those opportunities.
Yep.
In the same way we finagle and we make there be extra time and we make it happen to bring our girls to doctor's appointments. I mean, when we had to make that same day sick appointment for Anaya recently, like despite how busy that day was, you would have thought, you wouldn't have had time to accommodate everything.
You make time.
Yeah,
right.
You dropped things and made it. But we're not going to do that for ourselves. And maybe we don't have to, but maybe it's just saying, hey, I'm going to pick a day this week where I can do that and do it.
So really, it's like Nike, just do it, right? So I guess that's really what I feel like they should get out of this is you realize self-care is important, just do it, and we have to take our own advice in this. And so the next time we come back to this podcast, we both have to at least mention one thing that we did. Okay? Yes. So you can tell she's really excited for this podcast episode too. Or maybe she doesn't. She thinks, they're going to take care of themselves. But
And,
no.
yeah, and I think it's important for you to like hold yourselves accountable. Like help your partner out with this. Like spouses, hold your spouses accountable. Or members of the tribe. Like even tell your tribe members like, hey, I don't prioritize self-care for me. Can you help me out with this? Can you call me out if you notice I'm not? Can you maybe surprise me one day and say, you're going to come over and do this, or just, take an impromptu visit. And it's not just all the time so that, because I think we've had family offer us a lot, like, oh, we'll come over and watch the girls on Saturday. You can go on a date night. And even if we don't go on a date night, even if it's like they're coming over to allow us the self-care to have a minute to like fully step away. And it might literally only be a couple of minutes. But even that, like, gives us those couple of minutes of self-care.
Yeah.
And it's, again, not always this black and white, like so severe, like, okay, if we're going to do it, like, catch us in Bora Bora. Like, it just might be, whew, okay, I can be just totally stripped of my responsibilities for this moment in time so that I can do something else for me. And even if that is, wow, maybe I can like take a nap right now. Like that,
That's nice.
yeah, that might literally be your self-care. Like somebody come over for 30 minutes and I'll take a 30-minute power nap. And that will be what I do today.
And keep it simple, right?
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Keep it effective, right? Don't just make up something that you just put out of thin air that might not really help you. So,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a good topic. We hope you got a lot out of this one, just because I think this is probably one of the most important episodes, actually, because it deals with the sustainability of your family if you're a parent, right? And so it starts with you. And so we appreciate you all for tuning in. Again, if you're watching this by yourself, make sure you send it to someone
Yeah.
who you feel can benefit from it. Send it to family, friends, coworkers, whoever, right? Mom and them. And we also want you to subscribe if you haven't subscribed, because again, you get alerts every time we drop a new episode. And
we hope you enjoy listening to these for your own self-care. We appreciate you for taking the time to do it, whether it's prioritizing yourself and helping equip yourself. We hope you enjoy these episodes as a moment of reprieve and also to help empower you more.
And take it away, Leilani. What else you have to say to the camera?
Oh, yeah.
Or to the microphone?
She's going to be silent because we put her on the spot. But yeah, I just really am glad we had this conversation. And in the future, I hope we can shed light on it even more, because I think it's one of those things that is so important. And we as parents often forget the importance and neglect the importance. And so I just hope that for everyone listening, that they really can resonate to this, and that this is not something that you end up neglecting and seeing that it actually is more detrimental to you. I've heard of situations where people have actually wish that they did take the time to actually invest in themselves, because the outcome of them not was more harmful than anything. So I hope we can just avoid those things by just being proactive and just basically reaching our fullest potential as people, so we can reach our fullest potential as parents.
With that said, until next time, y'all. Peace.
Love ya.